Hey guys, welcome back to the Golf Podcast. This is episode number 333. 333.
333. That means we're 32 away from having one for every day of a year, a calendar year. And this is over how many years? 7 years now.
7 years.
Jeez.
Once a week for 7 years. But we're going to talk today about a topic, speaking of having all these episodes. Way back, we kind of dove a little bit into this because it's such a common struggle that golfers have is downhill putts.
Right.
Downhill putts can be tough. It can be a quick way to let a hole get away from you and end up with a much higher score than you intended because there's a lot of factors that come into play and it's difficult. So we've talked before about one of the really important parts of course management being trying to have an approach shot that leaves you below the hole so you can be putting uphill because it's going to be able to get a little bit more aggressive with your putts and things like that. But here we're going to talk a little bit how, ways that you can kind of adapt to it so that if you make the putt, great, but if not, at least, like I said, it doesn't end up being a disaster.
Because not every downhill putt needs to be a 3-putt, because usually it is.
Yeah.
Because usually we blow it past and then we're coming back 5 feet and we miss it.
Well, that's the demoralizing part about it is that if you end up with your next putt being the same distance or longer, and if there's ever a time when that's going to happen, it's going to be on a downhill putt because it tends to carry it past the hole. So there's some fundamentals to get, that we want to, go over, and there's also some strategy things. There's always going to be that. There's going to be execution and strategy. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do, and another thing I want to talk about, of course, is our own wedge fitting that we just did. And speaking of which, I mean, it's the perfect segue to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. Bob Vokey and his team, they're always grinding. I like that because it's a little...
See what they did there?
Yeah, a little pun there. Always grinding to produce an amazing product. But with the new Sm8 wedges, they've really made a giant shift forward. And we just got fit. Mike, I want to talk to you in a second about your own experience with that and what came out of it. I know I was incredibly impressed hitting the Sm8s with just the forgiveness, the smooth feel, that turf interaction. And really nothing beats a good fitting, which we'll talk about. We got fit with Kevin Sprecher. But with the Sm8s, one big change that Bob Vokey and his team made is that they pushed that center of gravity a little bit out from the face, and it changes the MOI. Hopefully you guys got a chance to watch that video that we did with Kevin Sprecher because I feel like nobody understands or explains this stuff better than he does.
Absolutely.
And it's like for us as golfers, it just feels great, but it's like, what's the mechanics behind it? So you don't have to understand all that technology. All you need to know is that it's there. It's going to help you make you a better player. Like I said, the Sm8s are something that you guys really need to experience, get the feel for them because it really is something that can change your game. You can feel especially how much it helps square that club at impact. So make sure you check that out. Go to Vokey.com. They've got a fitting tool there too, which you can use to kind of get your own idea of what best grind is going to be for you because there's many different grinds. Speaking of which, we went down there. We had our fitting.
We did.
I mean, going into a fitting, how much do you personally know about things like grind and bounce and things like that? Are you the type of person? I know there's kind of two types of golfers. You got your golfers who dive deep into it and kind of educate themselves, and then there's other types of golfers who just kind of put themselves at the hands of the professional, of the fitter.
Right. And for me, I'm the guy Kevin's the golf doctor. You go to a doctor, you don't need to understand platelet count or anything.
Right.
Let them teach me that. Yeah. That's why I don't brush up on anything. I don't care to know the importance of grind bounce. I love when Kevin explains it to me. And, he dissects the game by watching us hit our current equipment, comparing it, and then, getting a baseline and then adding the new equipment.
Yeah.
And it was great to see the results. Now, I'll switch it back over to you. We'll start with your results because you didn't really make much moves.
Oh, I did. I made a huge move in grind.
Oh, you did? That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. But as far as the numbers goes, you stick with the same degree.
Right. Which really tells me so much about the variances that can go into when it comes to wedges in general, right? Like, for example, you take a 7-iron. Obviously, there's a lot of changes that can go involved with things like shaft
sure.
and loft, lie angle. But within loft, within the manufacturers, the 7-iron, there's not a huge amount of variability. But when you come to wedges, like, first of all, gapping is such an important thing because you have these variations. You can go with all different degree wedges, and also even how many wedges you carry in the bag. You know, we both, because we have the T200s, which have a little bit stronger lofted pitching wedge, we both ended up with 3 Vokey wedges in the bag to fill in all that gap, you know, area. But I like that. I like that I can have a number of full swing options. We've talked before on the podcast about gapping, and we talked about full swing versus half swing and how you can get involved with that. But with wedges, there's also things like bounce and grind, which dramatically change the way that the club interacts with the turf. And like a lot of things that we talk about here, there's no one right answer for everyone. The benefit to wedges is that there are so many options to fit so many different golfers. We all kind of impact and come into impact differently. We see you and I have 2 totally different impact styles. And for me, we learned in the fitting that I kind of had been relying on height and I wasn't putting as much spin. You were putting a ton of spin on the ball and you were stopping it with that. I was stopping it with height, but I wanted to change that a little bit. Long story short, I ended up switching over to a K grind on my 60. And what I learned from Kevin in this experience, and this is something that, again, is why we're big proponents of working with a good fitter, is they'll often point out things in your game that you might not have otherwise thought of. I had resigned myself to saying my 60 degree was my greenside bunker club. I use it there and maybe on the rare occasion when I was like exactly 70 yards out and I could put a full swing on it. But I was afraid to use it on tight lies because I'd often dig in too much. I rarely chipped with it, even though I wanted to sometimes have a little bit more loft on my chip and stop it a little sooner. But again, I just wasn't interacting with the turf the way I like. And that's a function of just the way I swing the club. So anyway, Kevin, he'll direct you in the right direction. He gives me the K grind, and all of a sudden, and we show this in the video, it was a 1 swing difference immediately. The next swing, my spin jumped up
dramatically
by about 2,000 or 3,000 RPM, and my launch angle came down from 50 degree, which is way too high, down to somewhere in the 30s, which is more where he wanted to see it, just because of the fact that the club was interacting with the turf better.
Right.
And that was only from a change of the bounce and the grind.
That's it.
The loft was exactly the same.
Right.
The shaft was the same.
Right.
You know?
Isn't that wild?
So it is really wild. So no matter what it is, I mean, if you guys haven't addressed your own wedges, put that on your radar to get a wedge fitting.
Right. That wasn't just a fluke, the fact that you hit a good one with the new one.
Right.
Like, you kept doing it.
You kept doing it, and you felt it immediately. You felt like it just interacted, like I said, with the turf.
The turf interaction is incredible with these clubs.
And I've been doing a lot of my own, like, just kind of research and reading some of the different, as I said, diving into, like, whether it be Ben Hogan's book or Harvey Pennick's, little red book. And they all kind of had debated the order of importance of clubs, right? And it was kind of a switch. Harvey was saying, he went putter, most important club in your bag, wedges second, driver third. And Hogan was putter, driver, wedges. But wedges, and you could debate that back and forth.
Sure,
because Hogan would say you had to set yourself up on the hole with a good drive and whatever. But the reality is wedges also are anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 clubs in your bag. So it covers a big area. But we talk about them being really your scoring clubs. So if it's something that, if nothing else, if it's something that's been underlooked at in your own game, hopefully our experience in showing this is kind of the wake-up call to say, all right, I got to take a harder look and say, what is it? Because in my experience, like I said, going back to what I was saying, I was using that club for 1 shot, greenside bunker, right? Now, with the new setup, I'm comfortable hitting it from the fairway with a full swing.
Right. I'm
more comfortable chipping. I was hitting some great chip shots with it. Now, also, the good benefit of working with a good fitter / instructor is there's a little bit of instruction too there. And Kevin gave me one good tip, which it just hit home with me. He said, and I never would have thought of this on such a short shot. We're talking about like a chip shot, like maybe a 30-foot chip shot. He said, kind of swing like you're trying to put a draw on the ball. Like you wouldn't think drawing a ball that's barely, off the ground, but what that visualization helped me turn. And he said to you, I remember he said, like the buttons on your shirt, make sure you're focusing on turning them towards your target, because rotation is such an important thing, even in this short little shot. So that little rotation, all of a sudden I was getting these nice little nippers, and it was just, it was such better.
It's funny because he taught me that exact same tip in the original fitting 2 years ago when we were in that short game area doing the wedges.
Yeah.
He said the reason remember I just kept chunking the ball, I don't remember. And he's just like, you're not swinging through the ball. Like the club should come out, like you're trying to hit a draw, whatever. And it's an amazing little tip.
It's just like you never would think like a 30-foot little chip shot, like try to hit a draw. And I did it and it just worked. But anyway, I can then also rely on the club to interact the right way because I had the right bounce and grind for me.
Exactly.
Right. And even just dispelling some myths, like Kevin had said, oftentimes like the general misconception is that more bounce is for your less skilled players. And like these higher bounce, like whatever grinds, but then you look at it, even though it's a lot of bounce, you got guys like Justin Thomas and I think it was might have been Webb Simpson. These guys are using these clubs too. So it's not something that you should never rule out a certain club because you think it's just a broad category that this is only for this type of golfer.
Right. Well,
and you'll benefit from that.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's the beauty of having your fitter also to be a lead golf instructional coach.
Right.
It's pretty sweet.
But that's why we've always said a good fitting is worth its weight in gold. I think a good fitting is as important as the clubs themselves. So if you're going to be making that investment, if it's time to get new clubs, search around, find a good fitter near you. I mean, the backup is there are some great tools online, like the wedge fitting tool on Vokey, that it'll walk you through and it'll ask you certain questions, but there's nothing to me that replaces a really experienced fitter watching you hit balls and making changes.
100%.
So you guys, like I said, we'll dive into that more, but I wanted to at least bring it up here because it's helped our game. So hopefully it would help yours if you haven't taken a real hard look at your wedges, to look at it and look at, is there areas where you can get more out of them?
Absolutely.
Because we can only carry 14 clubs. So, all right, let's do a quick word from our sponsors. And then, Mike, I want to jump into talking about these slippery downhill pods.
Yeah, let's do it. So, guys, this episode is brought to you by ShotScope. Here it is. This new ShotScope V3. They're making a splash, Frank.
Big time.
Yesterday was their launch day, or a couple days ago, and
what did Garen say? It was bananas or something?
Something
like that.
Yeah, it was bananas.
Yeah.
But guys, this is going to be the best watch for the price for years to come. I mean, that's like the Mike personal guarantee right there. Love this watch. The price is ridiculous for the incredible product that you get. What is it? $179.
The launch offer, which doesn't last too much longer. So
right.
Jump in there.
Jump in there. It's probably going to jump up maybe to $199 or something after that. But let's talk a little bit about it. What is it? It's a stat tracking laser-like GPS watch that tells you everything you want to know about your golf game. And honestly, it's going to help you improve. It's going to help you play better because you'll be able to understand your game better. I mean, I love loading up the stats after a round and having that information available to me, whatever it is, fairway success, my left miss, my right miss, club usage. That's a great one.
Club usage, talk about fitting. How great is it to be able to walk into a fitter and show them, like, I got very low club usage on this, or gapping.
Gapping now.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, because of the ShotScope, I went in there yesterday and I looked and I said, I only use my hybrid 2% this year. Think about that.
Yeah.
So what I may do, now that I've upped my wedge from a 48 to a 50, I might actually play with a 50, a 52, a 56, and a 60 and remove the high. We'll see. We might get there. But I just, for me, it's like I know I can get off the tee about 260, 270. And on the courses that I'm playing for my tee boxes, I know it's probably only 120 less in home. So I don't really need a hybrid, but we'll get down there. But anyway, guys, check out the smaller, sleeker design of the V3 with the color screen display, longer battery life, interchangeable color bands. They're more precise, so on and so on. They really improved from the V2. I cannot stress that enough. Check it out. Visit shotscope.com/Golficity and get in the game with the all-new V3. Or if you want just GPS only, they have the G3 version. That's shotscope.com/Golficity. And Frank, before we move on, just want to thank FootJoy. At FootJoy, they know that the swing starts from the ground up. You can take on those uphill, downhill, side hill lies. That's why FootJoy provides the footwear you need for superior traction, stability on every single shot. Whether it's the all-new Pro SLs, which are the hottest shoe on tour.
I'm becoming a big Pro SL guy.
He's a huge Pro SL guy.
Yeah,
it's great.
They're growing on me more and more this year. I've been wearing them. I feel like they're my go-to lately.
They feel good. They're super comfortable. The max performance of the all-new Tour X, the all-new, the comfort and performance of the FJ Fury, or the number of other shoes FootJoy has to offer for every player. finding the right shoe does matter for your game. So shop now at footjoy.com.
All right, so diving into talking about these downhill putts. Look, first and foremost, we all acknowledge golf is a difficult game, right? But there are going to be certain shots and certain things that you've got to execute out there that are going to be harder than others. And one of those is going to be downhill putts. So which is why we say that oftentimes it starts with a good approach so that you can avoid these shots. So I think a good thing to liken it to is for anybody who plays billiards, pool, things like that. When you start to see the next level of player, it's guys who are they're thinking a shot or two ahead and where they're going to set themselves up. So they're not always having to react to kind of whatever happens.
Right.
So as you start to move towards being a better golfer and starting to hit better approaches, have better strategy that gives you a chance to hit better approaches, you're going to be we talk about like reading the green from a distance, not always waiting till you're on the green, looking at the areas where you can put yourself in position to hit an uphill putt. You'll be faced with them less and less. But no matter what, you're always going to still have to have the downhill putts. I mean, we see it on the PGA Tour. Guys make mistakes. They end up above the hole and they've got to putt down towards it. But first, I think a good thing that goes in just acknowledging the difficulty of it. Once you realize it, you're going to give it a little bit more respect. You're going to take maybe a little bit more time over that ball, reading it when it's a downhill putt. Because again, it really is a move from getting yourself away from a situation that's going to lead to kind of the snowball effect of worse and worse and worse. Again, it can quickly happen to like a 3-putt. So the first tip that we would have is if there's ever a time that your fundamentals, any issues with your fundamentals are going to be exposed, it's going to be on one of these trickier putts.
Makes sense.
Makes enough sense, right? So really, if there's a time to hone in and focus on your most important putting fundamentals, it's going to be here. Don't slack off, really look at it. So a couple of those might be, one, keeping your head still. Too much movement with the head and shifting with the body is going to really cause things like hitting it the wrong spot on the face. And it's any of that stuff is going to really hurt your pace, and pace is such an important thing here. Another thing is using a relatively soft grip. Now, not too soft. This is something, speaking of Kevin Sprecher, he pointed out to me, my grip was too soft and it was causing too much hand movement. And I was able to tighten that up a little bit and have my hands and arms working as one. But the reason we point this out is because as you are faced with something that's a little bit trickier, a little bit more difficult, there's the stress, the tension. And as tension comes in, what's the tendency? It's to kind of squeeze that club a little harder. So more so than even focusing on soft is focus on your normal grip. Go back to your normal. Don't get away from it because you're tense and you're starting to tense that upper body. And similarly, your lower body too. Knees, maintain some flex in those knees. It can be a real easy thing to do to stand up a little bit too straight and lock those knees, especially, again, it's a quote knee knocker.
Yep.
What's the tendency is to kind of lock it up. So just remember, go back to your fundamentals. A good stance, a good setup over the ball is going to set you up for the ability to make a good stroke. And that happens with all shots, but really here. So assuming that you're in a good position to make a putt, the next thing and probably the most important thing with these downhill putts is just to remember it's really going to be all about speed. Downhill putts, this is not the time to get aggressive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
you're not going for the cup here. Right?
Like, if nothing else, you're not going to say like where we say sometimes like go 6 inches past or aim past the hole or whatever it may be. You really can't use that buffer as much. You may still, go for holing it, but erring on the side of if you're going to do anything, it's not leave it too far long because the slope is just going to keep taking that ball further and further away.
Right. It's funny I say you're not going for the cup, but I usually on a long, tricky downhill putt, I'm never even thinking about holing it. My goal is to just put it within a 10.
Put it close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a great goal to have because it's avoiding that 3-putt.
Right. Because I feel like if I do go for it, that's when I get aggressive.
Right. And that's exactly what it should be. The real goal, depending. I mean, if it's a real short putt, even if it's downhill, you want to hole it. But the real goal, anything I would say, and it's crazy. If you ever have some time, look up the PGA Tour, the average make percentage from certain distances. And it will give you a new perspective on what you think you should make and what you shouldn't make. Because even I think it's at 8 feet, it's 6 feet, I think it was 66%.
6 feet.
Yeah, and then it drops off quickly. 8 feet is like 43%. So it quickly drops off. Now, put into the fact of it being downhill, you got to start to think like, okay, what should be my goal here? So let's say you're faced with like an 8 to 10 foot downhill putt. Really, a good goal here would be focusing on that 2 putt, like you were saying. How do I get this close enough that the next putt is not going to be a stressful one?
Right.
It's going to be something in that 2 to 3 foot max range, and I'm just going to be able to put it in. So again, what's going to be doing that is that speed, maintaining the right speed. And if you get the speed wrong, like that's where you're really going to end up that danger of 3-putting. I would rather you have the speed right and the read not as right on this. I mean, ideally you get the putt and the pace nailed down. That's how you make a putt. Right. But if either one of them is going to get more of your attention here, I think it's got to be the speed.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that when you're standing over a downhill putt, you immediately think it's going to be fast. And I think right there you end up, well, at least I do, stabbing at the ball or like not doing your full smooth stroke because you want to hit it less. Yeah. And it changes the whole stroke.
Yeah, it can be things like decelerating, punching at it. That's why the first thing is going back to those fundamentals. Still put a good stroke on it, but just be mindful of that speed and making sure you're taking a little bit off of it. And then this goes without saying. The next step would be play some extra break. No doubt about it. The less speed you put on the ball, the more the break comes into play. If we all know and have heard the phrase "power it through the break," it's also why when we read a longer putt, a lot of your focused attention of the read should be that last 6 feet towards the hole, because that's where the break is going to come most into play, because that right there is the ball is traveling its slowest pace. Early on in the putt, especially if it's a long putt, you may be putting so much pace on it that the break is not going to be as effective. It's going to kind of go through it. So kind of what you want to do is especially on this downhill putt, you're going to be putting a softer pace on it. Factor a little more break. I mean, think about if it was the exact same distance putt in the opposite direction going up the hill, you're going to have more pace. It's going to take some of that break out. Vice versa on the other side. Makes sense. Less pace. The actual undulations of the green is what's going to be causing more of the roll. You're just kind of like getting the ball going and letting the slope take its effect. But as that happens, also it's going to let the break take more of effect. So, it's possible too. Another thing is, like, if you feel like you're not playing enough break, the natural tendency would be to put a little more speed on it because you feel like you're kind of like you want to push it through there. So here's where, if you mindfully realize you feel confident that you're putting enough of accounting for enough of the break, you're naturally not going to hit it as hard. Gotcha. I think the subconscious thing is when we're kind of not quite, confident that we're playing the right amount of break, we hit it a little bit harder. And when we're confident in the read, we are able to put a little bit of a softer touch on it. Yeah. So really put your time into that read. That can be important.
One of the best pieces of putting advice I ever got, and I use this to this day, and it's nothing, new. We all heard it, is identifying where to leave your ball. You know how they say, like, here's your hole. The caddy will say, this is where you want the ball to die. Yeah. And I will always start a tricky downhill putt by finding out at what point, if the ball stops here, what is it going? Which way is it going to move to the hole? And it's usually like a foot within the hole, or depending on how steep it is, of course. But I think that's been one of the greatest tips I've ever gotten, because it has helped me get more 2 putts out of that instead of 3.
It makes so much sense. Just like picking a spot. Is that
pick a spot to have it die right there, and then watch the slope do the rest.
Let the slope take its effect. Right. So that's an important one. Have you ever done this too? There's another thing. Have you ever kind of deadened one by hitting it off the toe? I mean, I'm talking about this is usually This is usually a technique that you
never heard of this.
Don't use this technique until you've practiced it. Okay, that's first and foremost. But B, this is really only something I would advise on the fastest of downhill putts. But what you can do is intentionally miss the sweet spot. It's actually my father taught me this shot, and I've since heard a couple of instructors say it. obviously the sweet spot. We talked a little bit about like things like recently smash factor, transfer of energy, and the sweet spot is going to transfer the most energy. Even if you take your putter in your hand and just kind of like swing it like this and just kind of tap the face, right? And if you tap the sweet spot, the whole putter moves straight back. But if you tap out on the toe, the putter just pivots this way, right? So if you intentionally miss the sweet spot and hit the ball out towards the toe, it's going to deaden it a bit. It's going to transfer less energy to the ball. So it's something that requires a lot of feel to really control.
I bet, yeah.
But if you can try this first, test it out, go out to your putting green, whatever your practice facility is, look for the fastest downhill putt, and then just try hitting a few out off of the toe. It doesn't have to be a huge move, just maybe like a half inch out from center towards the toe. And you will notice it's going to take speed off, because the same putting stroke, the same speed, the same amount you're bringing it back and through is going to have an effect of less energy transfer to the ball by missing that sweet spot.
I gotta try it.
Yeah.
I definitely have to try this.
It's pretty wild. When we're done, you should go over that putt out over there and try it with your putter, because it's pretty wild, and it can be used. I would use it super, super sparingly, but if you're ever in one of those real dangerous positions, you can try this, and it is an effective tool that a good, knowledgeable golfer can have in their arsenal. And then the last thing would be warming up properly. It's like raise your hand if you've gone to the first tee without even going to the putting green.
Almost always.
Yeah. We're rushing through it. You go and you putt 2 or 3. If you've got the time, get over to the putting green, get a feel for it. Other things that come into play, it's not just this downhill. There can be things like grain. Different golf courses in different regions play differently. You can have it where grain has such an effect that almost can negate a slightly downhill and have it play like a level putt. But these are the things that you're going to be able to get a feel for before you get out there. Like don't have it where you're learning everything about the greens on the first green.
Right.
Because it's going to take you time to adapt. So if you can get out there, roll a few downhill putts, see what kind of speed you're getting on those downhill putts, and hopefully it'll be reflective of what you experience when you're actually out there on the golf course. Right. So get out there, warm that putter up for sure. Plenty of practice. But as with anything that we've talked about here on the show, practice is the most important thing. Familiarity is what leads to confidence when you're a golfer. So if you can be familiar with it by practicing it enough, you're going to be less nervous about the shot, more confident in it. A more confident shot means it avoiding things like the deceleration, off-center hits that are not intentional. All those types of things are going to come from that. So get out there, practice those downhill putts, have them be part of your repertoire so that when your course strategy doesn't work and you do end up above the hole, you're less apt to 3-putt.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And we did a challenge recently. It's not going to probably be out as of the release of this podcast, but we were really closely watching and trying to avoid 3-putts and seeing how much of a dramatic effect it had on score. Remember that?
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's been quite a wild ride since we've been back out there.
Yep.
Trying to do a year's worth of content in
been
6
filming
months.
a lot. Yeah.
But anyway, it can be. Again, nothing is going to replace good practice and getting out there and do it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed these tips. Like I said, it's something we've covered a little bit on the podcast before, but some new information. We've grown as golfers. You guys hear us say often we're not professionals. We're learning, and as we learn, we share. So these are some of the new things that we've learned, and we're working on them. Just because we share them here doesn't mean we're experts in them.
Right.
It's something that we've learned, and we're trying to put it in. And when we're playing golf out there, we're constantly reminding each other. I remember we talked about this. Do this, try this, whatever it may be, and if it works, we try to talk about it here. But if you got some of your own tips, if there's something that you feel like was worked well for you, especially on these downhill putts, drop them in the comments below, drop them in the Facebook group. There are a lot of ways to get in touch with us. And if you share that information, we can all learn from it.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's everything we have this week. You can get to the show notes by going to golficity.com/episode 333. 333. Easy one to remember. That's for sure. Get to the show notes, check it out. Or as always, everything is in the Golficity app, which is free for Android and iOS. Go to golficity.com/app, download the app. You'll get every podcast there, dating back to the very first podcast.
It's great.
If you want to
too.
go back and listen to what we sounded like almost 8 years ago, I think I would cringe if I listened to it.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I think I would. But hey, we got nothing to hide. Go
Right.
back, listen to episode 1. Tell us what you think. All right. That's everything we have for you guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.